I've been a professional chef for well over 20 years at this point, and before that I was a dishwasher and an avid home cook. I've made every single mistake in the kitchen known to man, and today I'm going to run you through 25 tips and tricks so you don't make the same mistakes. This is going to be a fun one, let's get stuck in. First things first, make sure you start your cook organized. I always have a rubbish bin handy. That's number one. So you're not running back and forth to the main rubbish bin. A few other things I have handy: salt, pepper, oil, spoons, a small knife and a palette knife. Number two, make sure you have your kitchen towels folded nicely, ready to go. A couple of J-cloths for wiping down your bench and some paper towels for the inevitable spill that you're gonna have. Number three, a blunt knife is a dangerous knife. Make sure you keep your knives sharp. This is not a knife sharpener. This is a honing steel, which is used to hone the end of your blade. These are knife sharpeners. Now, I'm not gonna go into how to use whetstones today, because to be perfectly honest, I'm not an expert. There will be a video linked below that I think is very good, but any type of sharpener is better than no type of sharpener. Even if you have one of these simple pull-through ones that you can get on Amazon for like $10, is better than nothing. Number four, getting comfortable using a knife and cutting technique. First things first, put a non-slip mat or a wet towel under your board so it doesn't move around. Get comfortable holding your knife. Don't hold it right here at the end of the handle. Hold it close, up near the bolster of the knife. Wrap your hand around your knife and secure it with your thumb and your index finger on the blade. You can have much better control. Then when you're holding food down, secure it like a claw. Roll your fingers in so that your blade is running against them and you have no risk of cutting your fingernails. It does feel weird at first to have the blade against your knuckles. After a bit of practice, it's second nature. Run the blade down your fingers, and that way you're guiding it. And let the blade do the work. You're gonna cut through the onion, you're not cutting down. And for most home cooks, there's three main cuts of an onion that you need to understand: the slice, the fine dice, and the large dice. Slices you're going to use for salads and stir fries, things like that. Fine dice for sauces and things that you kind of want the onions to almost disappear. And the large dice for stews, curries, things that you still want some texture in. Master these three before you start getting advanced into the other cuts. Next up, equipment that for whatever reason I resisted putting in my arsenal until later in my cooking career. And first up, the rice cooker. If you cook a lot of rice, this thing is invaluable. Now, I know a lot of people say, I don't need a single appliance. I get it. But trust me, if you cook rice more than twice a week, get one of these. It's so simple to use. Put your washed rice in, enough water to the first knuckle, close the lid, push start, and it's perfect every time. It even keeps it hot for you. Number six, the thermopen, the thermometer, whatever you want to call it. These things are invaluable in a kitchen. If you're trying to check the temperature of your steaks, your fish, chicken, your cake, whatever. These things are far more accurate than just touching it and trying to guess it. Unless you're a professional and you cook thousands of steaks a day, use one of these. The best restaurants in the world do. There's no reason why you shouldn't. Or don't. Honestly, it doesn't bother me. When you're moving ingredients around your board, don't use your knife, you've just sharpened it. Use one of these instead. You pick stuff up, put it in your pot, move it to the other side of the board, and the link's in bio for where you can buy my one. Number eight, a set of scales. These things are invaluable. Weigh your recipes, especially when you're baking. I actually weigh my oats every morning, not because I'm after a particular amount of oats. I like a certain consistency. So I know if I put 125 grams of oats in and 320 grams of water, it's the right consistency for how I like my porridge in the morning. Set of scales, they're invaluable. Make sure you have a set in your kitchen. Number nine, how to season cast iron and carbon steel pans. This is a brand new carbon steel pan. I'm gonna run you through how to season it really quickly. But first of all, why is it important? Well, these things have come back into fashion recently, and I think you're gonna find they ain't gonna go out of fashion anytime soon. They'll also last a lifetime. Brand new carbon steel pan. First thing you gotta do is wash it in hot soapy water. Make sure you get any of the machining oil from the manufacturing process. Place it into an oven for 5 minutes to dry, and then remove it and let it cool completely. Take any high smoke point, neutral flavored oil, and you're gonna rub a little bit on it all over the pan with a paper towel. Take off any excess at all. You just want the finest little layer. Into a 200-degree oven upside down, and you're gonna leave it in there for about 35 to 40 minutes. Remove it from the oven, let it cool, and rinse and repeat 2 or 3 times. These things just get better with age. I've had this thing for about 4 or 5 years now, and this thing is almost at the point where it's completely non-stick. As long as you heat it up properly, I can fry eggs in this thing, scramble eggs in this thing, and nothing sticks to it. The pressure cooker. Now this is one that I've literally only started using in the last 5 years, and I wish I learned about it earlier. It's used extensively throughout Asia and the Middle East. For some reason, we never had one growing up. These things are great if you're trying to do stews and braises. It cuts the time down by like 3/4. It effectively uses high pressure to make the liquids boil at a lower temperature, and they're fantastic. Sometimes they're tricky to get the lid on. They're also great for cooking rice, beans, and things like that, like hard legumes and pulses. And in general, just a fantastic piece of equipment that nowadays I would not live without. The pressure cooker. Finally, in the equipment section of this video, I just wanted to talk about the bare essentials. If I had to start again with nothing in my kitchen, these are the things that I would prioritize buying first. With this stuff, obviously, as well as knives, I can cook pretty much anything. A good set of tongs. Always gotta click it twice to make sure it works first. A Maurice, a rubber spatula, lots of different names. Good for cleaning out bowls, mashed potatoes, getting sauce off the side of pots. Important. A sieve, for so many reasons. Sifting flour for baking, passing sauces. You could even use this as a steamer if you want to. Over a pot of water, put the lid on top, put your veggies in there, instant steamer. A ladle, pretty self-explanatory. A whisk, also pretty self-explanatory. A wooden spoon, particularly one ideally with a flat edge, not a round edge. Easier to scrape things off the bottom of pans. A fish slice, for not only taking fish out of pans, flipping vegetables, flipping stuff on the grill, lots of uses. I like a stepped fish slice. These things are invaluable. I also like it when they're flexible. Boing. A peeler. You don't need a fancy one like this. Any kind of standard steel peeler. They're a few dollars. I like this shape one instead of the ones that have the blade going vertically though. I think you get better control and you can peel things faster and easier. And of course, a bench scraper. Saves you using your knife to move around veggies. Great for cutting up dough, making gnocchi, lots of uses. Invaluable little tool. Subtle plug. Next up, cooking tips and hacks pulled from mistakes that I used to make a lot. And number 12, thinking that there's only one way to do things. I've made thousands of recipes in my career, and some of them are quite different to others. Take the korma for example. There's like 12 different major variations and hundreds of sub variations on things. So don't be surprised if you see someone doing something different in the way that you have done. Try and educate yourself on it and understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. Because as my mate Joel says,
none of them wrong, all of them good, but everyone's mother's version the best.
Understanding the 5 major tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. So I'm going to demonstrate this by making nok jam, a classic Vietnamese dipping sauce. There's lots of versions of this, but this is a very basic one. And we've got chili for the bitterness, sweetness coming from the sugar, saltiness coming from the fish sauce, and sourness coming from either the lime juice or the vinegar. The only one we really miss out on this is umami, but I'll talk about that in a second. Once you've made your base recipe, taste as you go. What are you tasting? Is it well balanced? Does it need more sugar? Does it need more acid? Just because you follow the recipe to the exact measurements doesn't always mean it's going to be perfect. Why? The acidity of your lime might be different. The acidity of your vinegar might be different. Lots of variations. So taste as you go, because you can always put more in, you can't take more out. Now back to umami. MSG has had a bad rap for the last few years, basically because of racism. But umami is everywhere. And MSG is everywhere. It naturally occurs in tomatoes. It naturally occurs in Parmesan cheese. But umami as a flavor is something between savory and sweet. Now you can artificially add that by adding MSG, or you can just use things like Parmesan rinds and tomatoes. But trust me, MSG is in a lot of processed foods. So if you think you're not eating it, I'm afraid to say you probably are. Number 14, the importance of salting your food and seasoning your food all the way through the cooking process. It's all about building flavor. Salting throughout the cooking process ensures even seasoning. It'll also enhance the natural flavors of your ingredients, and it helps with texture, making veggies caramelize faster and meat more tender. Plus, salt balances bitterness and sweetness while aiding in chemical reactions like browning. Which leads us on to the next step, taste as you go. It's super important to make sure you're tasting your food as soon as it's safe to start tasting it. Taste it, adjust the seasoning. Taste it, adjust the seasoning. And be careful of reducing, especially if you're doing something like stocks and sauces. Don't put too much salt at the start, because as that sauce reduces down, it's gonna get saltier. So to recap those last 2 steps, make sure you're seasoning throughout the cooking process and tasting as you go. That way you should end up with a dish that's well balanced and perfectly seasoned. One thing I did fail out massively on my cooking journey is I didn't subscribe to the Andy Cooks YouTube channel soon enough. Honestly, it's impossible to ask you to subscribe without sounding cringy. I'm sorry. How to crack an egg. And I know what you're thinking, oh, come on, Andy, everyone knows how to crack an egg. But do you? For years, I cracked eggs like this on the back of my knife. And what happens is your yolk completely breaks up like that and you get little bits of shell in there. What you should do is crack it on a flat surface. Why? Because you just crack the shell and you don't break the membrane. That way, you can pinch your finger through it and break the membrane when you're ready. No broken yolk and no pieces of eggshell. And while we're on the topic of eggs, let me show you how to split the egg yolk from an egg white. 2 different ways. If I'm just doing a couple of egg yolks, crack your egg on a flat surface and break it ideally completely in half. Then you're just gonna pour the yolk between the 2 shells and try and get as much of that white off as possible. And there you go, your egg yolk and your egg white. Now, if I need to do a lot of egg whites to egg yolks, I'll crack all my eggs into a bowl, be really careful not to break the yolk, and then using a clean hand, just scoop out that yolk. And I find this is far more efficient and you're gonna have less shells if you do it like this, but it's only really worth doing if you need like 6 or more yolks. Number 18, follow the recipe, especially if it's the first time that you're making it. So before you even cook or buy the ingredients, sit down and read the whole recipe. You'll be amazed at how many little nuggets you find in there. Then get your ingredients ready, get them laid out, and then follow it step by step. Once you're confident with it, feel free to mix it up. I think it might be time to write another recipe book. How to use corn flour to thicken sauces, stocks, and gravies. Now, for years, I was taught that you cannot use corn flour to thicken the stuff. Why? Because of silly old French cooking. They're really particular about this. They only really reduce sauces and using the natural gelatins from bones and beef stocks. But hey, we have this at our disposal, so why not use it? It's pretty simple to do. You'd have a 1-to-1 ratio in volume of corn flour to cold water. Mix that till it completely dissolves and then pour that into your boiling stock or sauce. Wait for it to thicken and add more if you need to. But how much do you use? As a general rule of thumb, for every 500 mils of sauce you're trying to thicken, I use around 1 tablespoon of corn flour. And remember, just like salt, you can always put more in, but you can't take it out. Number 20, dress your salads as late as possible. Why? Because as soon as you put salt and acid on salad leaves, they're gonna start wilting. So it should be the last thing that you do before you serve your table or before you put it on your plate. Because no one likes soggy salad. I'll tell you what is nice, crunchy, well-seasoned salad. The next one we're all guilty of, myself included in this. I am naughty and sometimes still do this, overcrowding your pan, especially in the domestic kitchen where the BCUs or the amount of power that comes out of your stove is nowhere near as high as you'd get in a commercial kitchen. What happens when you overcrowd the pan? Well, all the cold produce that you're putting in the pan and the lack of BCUs don't let that pan get back up to temperature quick enough. So what can you do to solve it? Not overcrowd your pan, or if you can use a cast iron pan because that holds heat really, really well. However, there's a negative to that. It holds heat really well, so it's hard to control. If you've got that pan too hot, it's hard to bring it back down to temperature. So if you work in small batches, you're guaranteed to get a nice golden color instead of a soggy mess. Number 22, how to pan fry a piece of fish without having it stick to the pan. There's nothing worse when you're cooking a piece of fish and you cannot get it off the pan. The skin goes all flaccid and weird. Fish generally overcooks and you leave half it in the pan. This is how you avoid that. Oh, failed. You start with a pan that's hot. Doesn't need to be on fire hot, but you want it to be pretty well soaked in heat. While your pan's heating up, season the skin side of your fish. Then add your oil to the pan. Once your oil's shimmering, add your fish to the pan, skin side down, and place a protein press on top of it. Link below for my protein press, or you can just use another clean pan. Now, how long do you cook it for? Well, that depends on the type of fish that you've got. If you've got salmon, it will cook relatively fast. Something thin is obviously gonna cook a bit faster. Something like this piece of barramundi here is quite a dense fish and takes a little bit longer to cook. It'll probably take 8 to 10 minutes before you flip it. Just finish cooking on the other side, remove it from the pan and let it rest. So I'm a firm believer in flipping your food often. What does that mean? Well, I think there used to be a theory that you'd kind of put your steak or your burger or your piece of fish, whatever, in your pan and you'd leave it alone. I don't think that's relevant anymore. I honestly believe that you should be flipping it every 30 to 45 seconds and moving it around your pan. Now, this isn't just for steak. Even if you're doing a piece of toast in a pan, move it around the pan a lot. If you're toasting a burger bun, move it around the pan a lot, because you're gonna get more even color. So if you're cooking a steak, place it in, fat cap side down, render some of that fat, then you're gonna seal the edges before placing it on the face of the steak, flipping it every 30 to 45 seconds on the other face, back and forth until you reach your desired internal temperature. Butter basting. If you're doing a piece of chicken, a piece of fish, a piece of steak, this applies to everything, and I'm fully guilty of this myself. If you get your pan too hot, you're gonna burn the butter. Yes, you want foamy golden butter right on the edge of burning. But as soon as you burn the butter, it goes black, it starts to taste bitter, and it's no good. Once your piece of fish or steak is ready to be basted in butter, add your butter to the pan, and then if you're gonna add aromats, you add your aromats at that point, and then start spooning that butter over the skin of your fish or that nice crust of your steak until it gets lovely and golden. Has heaps of benefits, adds lots of flavor, also helps your seal get a lot more even because you just got hot fat hitting on the top, but control your temperature. Too hot, you're gonna burn your butter, no good. And number 25, make sure you get a good sear on your meat, piece of fish, chicken breast, mushrooms, all of the above. And how do you do that? Well, you follow the above 4 or 5 steps. Don't overcrowd your pan, make sure you get your pan nice and hot, flip your protein or veg often, and don't burn your butter when you're basting. If you follow all those steps, you're gonna have a delicious steak and your day is not gonna be ruined by a soggy, gross steak. So there you go, 25 things that I had to learn the hard way. Hopefully you've taken something from this, and let me know in the comments what things you struggle with in the kitchen. Thanks so much for watching, legends. Like this video if you took anything from it, subscribe if you're not, and we'll see you next week for another recipe. Peace.